He is one of the next big things in sports broadcasting. His trajectory is limitless. It is Justin Kutcher, Washington Wizards TV voice, also a fixture with Fox Sports, doing college football, the NFL, college basketball, the list goes on, baseball. He's also a proud member of Boston University and their alumni network. You can follow Justin on Twitter at Justin Kutcher. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. I'm a national anchor for Fox Sports Radio. Justin, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. And as a dog lover, I know that you've stepped into the realm of doing some unique broadcasting. Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show. You were part of the broadcast team. What was that experience like as far as planning and execution?
Well, first of all, Bryan, thank you for having me. It's awesome to be here. As far as the Westminster Dog Show, I love how you're going right into it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the true story. A few years ago, gosh, it's probably 6-7 years ago now. It seems like it was just yesterday, but I get a call from one of my bosses at Fox as I'm driving from Charlotte to Atlanta, and I had just done the Bills and Packers the day before on Fox, and I'm thinking, all right, Aaron Rodgers, Packers on Fox, like, all right, I'm making it. This is good. And I get a phone call, and it's my boss, and she says, hey, did you make it home okay yesterday? Yeah, I got home no problem. Direct flight. It was easy. Okay, I wasn't really calling about that. I'm like, I didn't think so. What's up? And she says, what are you doing? What are you doing like Valentine's Day? And I go, what day is that? And she goes, February 14th. I go, no. I realize I'm single. I know what day Valentine's Day is.
Yeah.
I meant like, what part of the week is it? And I said, the reason I ask is because I was planning on taking a couple of days off. And she's like, well, we want you to do the Westminster Dog Show. And I said, wait, are you serious? And she says, yeah. I go, wait, for real? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, oh man. Okay. And she goes, I tell you what, take a day, think about it, get back to me.
Sure.
So I call my dad. He's like, Just, you should do it. I go, really? I call my agent. He's like, I think you should do it. I'm like, really? So the next day I give her a call, leave her a voicemail. I'm like, hey, give me a call back. She calls me back. And I said, you've got your man. She goes, really? I go, yeah.
Wow.
I go, you sound so surprised. And she's like, well, based on your reaction yesterday, I thought there was no chance. And I went and I did it my first year. Didn't know what to expect. I grew up, I'm a diehard skier.
Okay.
And it reminded me doing the agility competition of calling a ski race, where I set things up. My analyst kind of takes you through the race. When you see the split times, I kind of chime in, and then at the end, I say something. But I love it. It's a ton of fun. My first year, I did not love it because it was tape delayed, and we had to do all these edits. And when it aired, my dad said to me, he goes, well, that was your mother's favorite thing you've ever called. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm doing that one again. And it became one of my favorite things to call.
How did they decide on you for this? What was it about your delivery and your master of being able to broadcast that slotted you as the guy for this?
I have no idea. One of my bosses thought I'd be a good fit. And next thing you know, here I was. Maybe it's because I don't take myself too seriously.
Sure.
I don't know. Or it's because I called shooting during the Olympics in 2012, and they're like, well, if he can call shooting, he knows nothing about that. Maybe he can do a dog show.
Oh, stop it.
So it's been fun. And I will be honest, it's the event that I do where I get the most ticket requests by far and away.
Wow.
It's crazy. I mean, the amount of ticket requests I get for that event blows my mind.
Oh. What's a story, and as you look back at your career so far, Justin, where persistence really paid off? There was one example that you can easily recall where if it wasn't for persistence, you would not have had the breakthrough you would have had in your career.
I don't know if it's just one thing. I think it's just being persistent all the time. And it's not persistent as far as bothering somebody.
Yeah.
It's persistent as far as being dedicated to trying to make it. And I still think I've got ways to go. Um, I think it was just in college, not letting anything stand in my way. Uh, I've said for the longest time, I think this industry, sports broadcasting, is very similar to acting. Um, you can struggle for a long time and you're going to lose weight. You're going to work multiple jobs. You're going to work hours that nobody else wants to work. If you make it, you do okay. And I think that's what acting is like. I mean, I've told the story. My first job, I went to Portland, Oregon, and I made $500 a month, and my rent was $465. I lost 15 pounds in 6 weeks, not even trying, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And you know, from there, I realized what I could do. I realized what the job was about. I got to go to a ballpark or a studio every day, and I'm like, this is what I want, and nothing's going to get in the way of that. You make sacrifices along the way, but I think for me, they were sacrifices that were, well worth it.
Justin Kutcher is with us, TV voice of the Washington Wizards and also a prominent face with Fox Sports. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports on the radio side. You've had one year now as the TV voice of the Washington Wizards. Has given you some time to self-reflect a little bit. And as you take that post and you think about that year that you just finished up with, how was it trying to warm yourself up to the Washington fans? Because they're dedicated and they
Mhm.
love their basketball.
Yeah. Well, first of all, for the first year, it was the craziest year that I could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
We're broadcasting, we get to March, and I kid you not, I talk to my parents a ton, probably every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And I was walking to go pick up dinner that night when my mom says, the NBA season just got suspended. And I'm like, no, no, mom, it's the OKC Utah game. That game got postponed. She goes, no, there's a ticker going across saying the NBA season just got suspended. I said, yeah, I gotta call you guys back,
Jeez.
because I'm supposed to fly to Boston the next day and do the Celtics Wizards game
Yeah.
in 2 days. So I called my producer and he's like, yeah, we're not going. So it was crazy. And
Jeez.
then all of a sudden it resumes in July and we make the 22 teams. But as far as warming myself to the Washington fan base, um, honestly, Bryan, I wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary or what I would normally do. And everything that I was told by other broadcasters who are team broadcasters who replaced, legends in their cities, they just said to me, they said, Justin, be yourself
Great
and
point.
go ahead, call the game, call as you know how to call a game. That's why they hired you. And that's what I tried to do. I knew um, that I would be passionate about the Wizards. I knew it wouldn't come day one
Sure.
because you have to learn about the guys. But once you're around these guys every day, you go to every practice, you see how hard they work, you see what they're like as people. It's almost impossible not to root for them. And once that happens, for the first time since really 2005, when I was calling minor league baseball, I was emotionally invested in the outcome of the game. When we do a game with Fox, despite what people might think, we don't care who wins. We just want a good game.
Yes.
When you do a game for the Wizards, you want to win.
Yeah.
And we had a game this year against the Bulls. We blew an 18-point lead with like 8:20 to go. I was miserable. Like I left the arena that night just fuming. And I said it in the interviews leading up to the season. I go, honestly, I will probably take losses harder than the players.
Wow.
Like that's just when I truly get into it, I really felt like that would happen. And people would call me after a game like, you okay? I'm like, no, I can't talk right now. And so it was a ton of fun. I think because the season got broken up the way it did, disjointed, I almost feel like next season is kind of still almost year one in a way,
Sure.
because the fans, whether they tuned in for the restart or not, if they didn't tune in for the restart, you're going almost 10, 11 months between
Yeah.
seasons. So I'll have to kind of reintroduce myself.
That authenticity that you're talking about must be really endearing to fans to know how much it means to you. And that's one way how they can gravitate towards you because, like you said, it takes a lot out of you when you really are feeling the heartbeat of this team and you want to see them thrive so much. And so you hit upon the NBA restart and being a part of the bubble. And obviously you were, from what I could tell, Justin, you were doing it from the NBC Washington studios or calling some of
Yeah.
these games.
Hmm.
So in any way, how were you having to tweak your planning, your preparation for a game, given the limited resources you had, and also your inability to be face to face with the players in terms of getting content for the broadcast?
Yeah. There was a big difference in the sense that I would go to every practice, or I would go to shoot arounds, day of games, and I'd see things. And to be honest, a lot of it early on was I wanted to familiarize myself with the team,
Sure.
but I wanted the players to feel comfortable seeing me
That's
and
a great point.
knowing, hey, I'm around the team. And also, especially after a game, I've always said this, I feel like I have to be honest when I call a game. And so if somebody's not having a great game, I got to say, it's just not one of those nights. And I've always thought that if I say something that a player's not happy with me for saying, I'm going to be at practice the next day. If you want to come up to me and say something to me, I'm right there. I want to be held accountable. I want them to know that I am not shying away from anything
Yeah.
and this and that. So, not being able to do that for the restart was difficult. Not that I was criticizing, but because I couldn't pick up little nuances. I couldn't talk about those during the broadcast. Um, I don't want to. I didn't want to bother, Coach Brooks and different coaches and try to hit them up, whether it was via text or call or whatnot. So I'm basically going off the game notes, and then I'm also going off what I see in the previous games. But I, I think my mentor in the business is Joe Buck, and Joe taught me years ago. He said, "Call the game. It's the most important thing you could talk about. If you need to look something up, you've got time." And so for those games, I wasn't trying to inundate the broadcast with stats or stories or whatever. I would let the game dictate what I was going to do. And if it reminded me of a story, I talk about it. Otherwise, let's just talk about what we're seeing and how this helps going forward.
That transparency you talked about being at practices the following day is really a great way to establish those relationships with the players. And then you get insights and nuggets from them that you can use to the broadcast. And it's a very mutual, symbiotic relationship. Justin Kutcher is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. And as you have been warming up to the fan base, also to the broadcast team, and having the opportunity to work with different analysts like Drew Gooden and Glenn Consor. And so, what are ways that you've used, even off the court, getting to know these guys, building up that rapport? Because when you have that rapport, it certainly shows up during games, that
Right.
broadcasting chemistry.
So I think it's my work with Fox, I think really helped prepare me for the Wizards season because Drew Gooden, he was the primary analyst, but uh, Glenn Consor was there. We had Karan Butler for a bunch of games. So I think we ended up rotating in 4 analysts at some point.
Okay.
But the primary one was Drew. And for me, I can remember when I got the job, before we could really say much, I got Drew's number and I gave him a call. And every time I've ever worked with an analyst for the first time, I always call them, introduce myself. have a conversation, just let them know like, hey, can't wait to work with you. Whatever I can do to help, let me know. And I'll tell you a good story about that in a second. But
Sure.
so I called up Drew, and he answers. He's like, hello. I'm like, hey, is Drew there? He's like, who's this? And I'm like, Drew, hey, what's up? It's Justin Kutcher, your new play-by-play partner with the Wizards. He's like, oh, what's up, man? How you doing? And so we start talking, and he was like, did you go out to celebrate as well? He's like, man, this is so much. This is so awesome. I can't wait. So when we did our first preseason game, it happened to be against the New York Knicks, the team I grew up rooting for.
Okay.
I was after the game. I was like, hey, you want to go grab a bite? And he's like, yeah, sure. So we go grab a bite to eat, have a couple of cocktails, and we just probably hung out for 2 hours after the game. We do another preseason game. You want to eat? You want to drink? He's like, sure, let's go.
Yeah.
And for me, that part of it. That's where you build that relationship.
Absolutely.
Is when you go out and you spend time, and it's not you're working, but you're talking, getting to know each other, see what your interests are. And after the third game, he's like, dude, I've gone out to dinner with you more in these 3 games than anybody else in my previous years. And on the road, when I'm, doing my games with Fox, we would always go out for dinners. That was just the norm. And I loved that. It's one of the best parts. I mean, when you interviewed Petros, like those stories get told at dinner. And honestly, like I try telling any new analyst that works with us, just wait till those production dinners, because just sit back and don't work out that day, because you'll get an ab workout from laughing so hard from Petros telling stories.
Oh my gosh.
So it's just, but that's where I think you build it. And, and that's what we did. And once Drew and I did that, we hit it off. And I think one thing I've always told my analysts, or not even told them, but they realized, is I'll treat them just like I treat anybody else. So if they make a dumb comment, I'll make fun of them. If I make a dumb comment, they can make fun of me. But more importantly, I always have their back. And I tell them all the time, Drew was newer to broadcasting. I said, dude, I got you. If you're done talking during the open, I'll fill in the rest.
Sure.
I'm like, that's my job. My job is to make you look good. And I said, trust me, I will always have your back. And the same thing with Karan, same thing with Glenn, everyone. That I think is the job of the play-by-play guy, is obviously call the action, but also set up your analyst. Make sure they become stars. And if you have that chemistry off the air, it's going to translate on the air. And I've always said that the viewer has to laugh at least once during every one of my broadcasts, not because I'm a comedian, but because I'm having fun. I love what I do. And if I'm not laughing during a broadcast, something is seriously wrong.
It's really telling, Justin, because as much as this business is about ego and showing off and nailing a call, you're just as happy and pleased when you set up your analyst for the slam dunk as you are for the slam dunk. And I think that says a lot about your character and why guys gravitate to want to work with you when you develop those rapports with the Drew Goodins and others you work with, which another person that you just brought up, leading us into how we conversed and we got to know each other, Justin, is through Petros Papadakis, who is just – he has a well of stories, and you and him were part of one of the wilder games on Fox Sports 1 and that college football package. It was Oklahoma State. It was Central Michigan, and some might say that the ending was kind of a fluke, but Central wins. Then Petros goes into the bedlam that takes place following the game. And how did you guys coordinate it from your perspective, capturing the madness of the moment?
You know what's funny is that the first half of that game, I sucked.
What?
Like, I was terrible. I kid you not. Like, I looked at my stats guy, and he's like, hey, second half, let's go. And I'm like, all right. But nobody remembers that part because of the finish. And Petros, like he told you on the air, he said, the quarterback's arm is not good enough to throw it into the end zone. So he thinks they're going to have some sort of lateral play. It's one play, untimed, and he throws it up in the air, and I see the kid catch it, and he makes the lateral. And when he makes the lateral, it's one of those moments where you kind of just see things happening, and you saw the angle that he was taking towards the
Yeah.
corner, and you see the defender coming, and I'm like, oh my God, he's going to get in. And so I make the call, and it's like, I mean, they don't want us to use Bedlam because Bedlam is Oklahoma versus Oklahoma
That's
State, but
true.
it
Yeah, yeah.
was, I mean, it was madness. It was insanity. And I just remember, making the call, laying out. Petros jumps in, and he's talking about it. And then we have Mike Pereira come on and said a play should never have even taken place because they're actually reviewing to see if he got into the end zone. And Mike's like, he crossed the plane, but really this play should never have happened. And it's like, oh my gosh. And all this is happening when the game ended. I'm just looking around. I've got like Ken Trevor is doing the spotter. I've got Scott Lightman stats. I'm looking at Petros, and we're all just like, oh my gosh, that really just happened. And as Petros said, he had to run down. I didn't know that. I didn't know that
Oh.
till afterwards. We're in the car, and he tells us the whole story in the car as we're driving to the airport. And we're like, wait, what? So it was crazy. But it was one of those calls that, I mean, you can't really prepare for it.
Yeah.
But when it was happening, you realized, holy crap, this is really happening.
And I'm sure when you were in the car with Petros, like he was, as you said, he was talking more about what happened from his perspective, running down how many flights of steps, his jacket, his dress shirt soaked with sweat.
Yep.
And then he goes into the locker room and he just like starts yanking on the SID and says, "Give me coach." And he finds coach in the bathroom, and he's so overwhelmed emotionally that he doesn't want to leave the bathroom. And then Petros is knocking on the door. Like, this is insanity, like you said. And when he told you all of this, and then the interview looked great, and obviously it ran on the network over and over again, but like, what were you thinking? Like, Petros, what were you doing?
Well, thank God it was Petros. Okay.
Yeah.
First and foremost, because P can do that. He just has that ability to like grab somebody and say, "Come on, let's go."
Yeah.
And if I went to go grab the guy, he wouldn't have moved. But Petros's hands are huge,
Yeah.
and he just grabs him. "Come on, coach, we're doing this." When he told us the story in the car, we're like, "No, come on!" And he's so animated, and he's such a great storyteller. But he's always telling the truth,
Yeah.
and you're just like, how does that happen? How does that finish that we just saw take place? And then on top of all of that, he has to go into the locker room, and this scene that
Yeah.
he's describing is even more insane. Yeah, and it was the first game of the season,
Yeah.
which is so much of it is just so wild. And honestly, every year at some point, we always like P and I always have a new analyst, and every year at some point during dinner, one week he tells a story, and it's priceless.
Justin Kutcher with us, Wizards TV voice, also does so much with Fox Sports. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Justin, my final question for you, and outside of that game experience and nailing the call with Petros, Central Michigan versus Oklahoma State, if you were to look back at all the games you've called, all of the tight finishes, if there was one game or one couple lines that you love what you said at the height of the moment and you were to like make a plaque out of it or just like canvas it on a wall, what is that moment? When is that game?
2015 Women's World Cup quarterfinals, France, Germany. Um, France had never beaten Germany. Obviously, it was a trip to the semifinals on the line. I was working with Allie Wagner. She's awesome. and we were in Montreal calling the game. And during the whole game, I have an older brother
Mhm.
who's 6 years older. I grew up idolizing him. And there's always that moment like, can you get over the hump? Can you beat that older sibling?
Yeah.
And that's when you know you've made it. And for some reason, that just kind of popped into my head as France was the younger sibling
Oh,
against Germany. And so I was talking about that and weaving that in throughout the broadcast. France had the lead. They had the lead late. There was a late, I think it was a penalty. Germany scored, tied the game. We go to overtime. And we end up going to penalty kicks. On the last kick, the German keeper makes the save and Germany wins. I then have 30 seconds to summarize what we just saw and send it back to the studio.
wow.
And growing up, I can remember the 1997 World Series, the Marlins and Indians, and watching that. It was on NBC, and Bob Costas was doing the play-by-play. When the game ended, Costas had like a 90-second monologue talking about the series, the significance, all this stuff. And I remember watching that as a kid going, how did he just do that? That was incredible. And somehow, some way, when I got 30 seconds to talk about that game and what happened, I can't tell you exactly what I said. I'd have to go back and watch it.
Mhm.
But it was something, along the lines of like, you know, ultimately the older sibling won.
Wow.
And I timed it out perfectly, hit it on right when they said one. I threw it back to the studio and I took off my headset and I sat down and I had my hands on my head. I was just like, holy cow, that just happened. Like that really just happened. And Allie even looked at me and she's like, that was awesome. And yeah, that was the one where, in the moment, you just go. And to wrap it up in 30 seconds, that's probably the one I'm most proud of.
Well, Justin, I expect many more similar moments like
Thank you.
you just had in that story in your future. Justin Kutcher, follow him on Twitter. Watch him, Washington Wizards, as far as their TV play-by-play man, also doing stuff with Fox. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. Justin, this has been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed the storytelling session, and next time you get out to the West Coast, man, it would be great to meet you once we get the NBA back and get guys traveling and get some normalcy. Whenever you get to Los Angeles, man, would love to finally meet you.
That'd be awesome. Looking forward to it. Let's get back to normalcy.